Hi, and welcome to this week's Taming the Polar Bears webinar. The topic this morning is mindfulness, meditation, cognitive behavior therapy. That's quite a mouthful of words and stuff going on. So we talked at length about that in the presentation on Thursday. But just briefly, for those who didn't watch the presentation, or just to remind and go over things. Oops, I'll get this camera angle figured out here sooner or later. But yeah, mindfulness, meditation, cognitive behavior therapy. Mindfulness, as we learned in the broadcast, let me, hang on, I'll just pull this over here so we can see all our little polar bears over here. Mindfulness, as we learned in the broadcast, is, again, if we go down to the root word of mind, and the way brains are supposed to work, and not necessarily work, but our minds are supposed to be able to understand what's important and where to put the focus. Big problem in today's world, obviously. Well, it can always be a problem, but more of a problem in today's world. We get, with our inner mental states and the world around us, we can get really out of whack, to put it mildly, where our attention should be, where our mind should be, where we're putting mindful focus on. So mindfulness is a training to help us learn to do that better. If you're having trouble with attention and focus, it doesn't necessarily mean you're some broken down heap incapable of it. It just, we're all kind of like that. And the difference between those who do it well and those who don't do it well is, there's some brain anatomy and biology involved, of course, but we can train that to work better. Okay, so mindfulness, and I've got some interest, just a couple of questions on this that I'll address at the end if nobody brings any questions. I'm not expecting any questions, and I can't afford to give you a free trip to Hawaii for asking questions, but you might surprise me. Anyways, there's just a couple of interesting things on mindfulness that I'll get to at the end to clear up a couple of common misconceptions. Meditation. Meditation is just another tool we're going to learn to bring some of our brain and body biology and deep instinctive stuff under control. When we do those simple meditative techniques that I taught in the presentation on Thursday, and I'm going to try get some shorter videos about just the meditation techniques. And what we're doing when we learn these simple meditative techniques is we're actually, like, again, when I mentioned in the broadcast, breathing is as deep an instinct as there is. Every living, breathing creature, that's job one for some real deep brain mechanisms. And when we learn to do these simple breathing, meditative breathing techniques, we are using these frontal lobes of ours to exercise control over really deep body instinct and biology. And, when I get to I've got to write a post, and I'll do a little presentation like this on meditation alone. There's some really, really interesting science on the power that can have over all kinds of brain mechanisms and how they work. And, not only when we start to learn to control our breathing, the breathing calms the heart rate down. The heart rate, calm the heart rate down. That slows down pumping all kinds of stress hormones throughout our body and brain, and we can exert with just the power of meditation that we're learning with these frontal lobes of ours. We can start exerting much more control over what's going, these seemingly out of control things going on in our brain and body. Okay, so this is a really important skill. Again, you don't have to get into all this weird guru, all this stuff that people usually associate with meditation. It's just really, for our purposes, and again, people can do whatever they like once they learn the basics. But for our purposes, and everything I do and teach, these really basic techniques are really all you need. Okay, now cognitive behavior therapy. I'm going to just kind of go over this again so we understand, better understand how that works, and how, eventually this, all the things the basics, the polar bear basics, those positive difference making fundamentals. The long range plans, I have, I can take each one of those, and I want to make a little mini course out of all of them. So this is, a lot of this is just introduction stuff, and we'll learn more ways to do this. We go from beginner level and work our way up to all kinds of fun mastery stuff. So, again, I just want to introduce the basics and really get this to get a foothold in your mind, and what you believe is possible, and what you can learn to do, and what's possible out of that. Okay, so we start. We have kind of a core. I'm going to talk about these a little bit more. Beliefs, I put in there, values. This is kind of you. There's others. This is kind of social, family stuff, how that ties in there. Future. When we are talking about anxiety, I was reviewing some of the science and brain stuff on anxiety. And much of what anxiety is about is this. And I'm going to tie this into one day at a time towards the end. But this is where we really want to get a bit of a hold over what's going on with anxiety. Okay, so, oops. Well, Mrs. Bean has showed up. Now she's going to be playing with my cords, and I don't know what she's going to do here. Okay, so we have behavior. Thoughts. Feelings, emotions, all these things. We just put that under the heading of feelings. And, one of the, it doesn't matter how you approach the human mind and brain and all these wacky things us people do, psychologists, psychiatrists, all these different fields will all agree. They don't agree on much, but they'll agree on this. Thoughts are going to affect behavior. Behavior is going to affect feelings. Feelings is going to affect thoughts. And these all go the other way. Behavior is going to affect thoughts. Thoughts are going to affect feelings. And feelings are going to affect behavior. This is really, really fundamental in what goes on in any given individual, regardless of what they're dealing with, where they are on this whole psychiatric mood disorder thing. You could take any disorder in the diagnostic and statistical manual. It'll boil down to these basic things. There's just some disagreement, we shall say, about how to sort these things out. Okay, now kind of what we didn't touch on before was this core stuff, and you know, it says you here, but I also kind of put ego there. Ego is a strange term that nobody really understands, but everybody likes to throw around. Everybody has an ego, people. It just depends on, you know, there's a great amount of variety as to what they exactly are. But anyway, ego is kind of our sense of self and you and all these little core things. You know, but all these, you know, these will affect the behavior, thoughts, and feelings, and the behavior, thoughts, and feelings will have an effect on our cores, right? So you know, all these things can go back and forth. And, you know, as you know, if you're listening here and you've been where I've been or anywhere near where I've been, you know, what's happening is this is kind of all out of control, okay? So our little sessions of mindfulness, meditation, cognitive behavior therapy, it's just a tool. Now, you know, when you examine any case, and, you know, this was certainly true with me, and as you know, I've examined a lot of cases, I follow a lot of people, and what will happen with us is we really, you know, this is kind of one of the defining things of any mental health disorder is we get really closed in on ourselves. And we, you know, we're alone kind of with our thoughts and ideas and all these things going on. And, you know, what happens is, you know, all these things sort of start to reinforce what's going on in our mind. And this is why most cases are so hard to deal with the person. And this is, you know, could be anybody, not just you. This is what happens in any kind of case of mental health disorder. You know, again, whether it's from depression to the high end of the scale of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, we become kind of our own gatekeepers of what's going on. And, you know, when things aren't working well, and, you know, we're using the very thing that's not working well to understand what's not working well. You know, as you can imagine, that doesn't work very well. This has been well observed for thousands of years. So one way that it's important to look at, you know, a tool like cognitive behavior therapy is what we're kind of doing is creating a different thought system that's outside of what's going on in our minds, okay? And what we want is kind of a more objective outside view and tool of what's going on in our mind to question our thoughts, even our beliefs, our feelings, all these things going on. And, you know, as I said in the broadcast, one of the keys was that we do this non-judgmentally. That's not attaching blame, anything like that. We just want to understand what's going on and a different way to react to that. Okay, so non-judgmental, non-reactionary way of looking at all these things. Okay, it's you know, as I've said over and over and over again, one of the real fundamental tenets of the whole polar bears thing, polar bears approach, here's Mrs. Bean, is to get away from judgment and blame. Those two things are going to be, oh boy, those two things, judgment and blame, are going to be a big part of any difficult mental health case, whether we're judging and blaming ourselves or dealing with judgment and blame from others. So we need a space to get away from that, get out of that rut of judgment and blame that keeps us in a bad place. Okay, so now I just kind of wanted to break down some of these terms a little more, and I want to talk about these a little bit more too. So, you know, we you know, use the term thoughts, and thoughts are, you know, kind of entail a lot of things, a lot of concepts. But just to separate thoughts from, oh, Mrs. Bean is being a pain in the butt here. Just to separate thoughts from kind of the concrete world around us. Thoughts are, you know, all the kind of ideas and the way we imagine things, the way we talk to ourselves, the way we imagine people talking to us. You know, thoughts, as I've been trying to establish, in which you kind of know can drive us crazy. And this is why I kind of start with thoughts. That, you know, none of this stuff is easy, but thoughts, in my view, is the best place to start, because they're, you know, feelings are a little bit more concrete than thoughts, and behaviors are, you know, actually concrete. They're visible and observable. Okay, so thoughts is kind of where we want to start. Now, behaviors, you know, what is exactly a behavior? And this is kind of a, you know, even something seemingly as simple as behavior is, you know, you get into all these different fields of psychology and psychiatry. And here's Mrs. Bean again. She doesn't like it when I'm paying attention to you guys and not playing with her. Now she's going to wave her tail at everybody. Yeah, so behaviors, you know, we're just going to, you know, just like I say, our observable actions, what we do, you know, our kind of our physicality. You know, again, behaviors are observable to other people, not always in the best light. Okay, so behaviors, and, you know, behaviors, you know, are just one of those things, you know, that it can be a bit of a kettle of fish. You know, we all like to think we behave well, but the truth is our actions, you know, what we do, how, you know, behaviors kind of tie into how we, you know, what our reactions, you know, our observable reactions are, and how they tie into what's, you know, behaviors are often created by what's going on inside of us. Simple example, straightforward example, you know, we're feeling some sort of hurt or pain. Crying is a behavior associated with that. You know, might be some kind of angry response. You know, that's, you know, not really any different than crying. It's a response to some kind of hurt or something going on inside. So, you know, those are some kind of simple examples of behaviors that arise from an emotion or feeling, but a behavior that kind of could work against us and kind of feed into this, kind of a negative cycle of behaviors, thoughts, feelings. Okay, and feelings is probably the most complex of all of these things. People have very strong feelings about their feelings. Nonetheless, very, very, very individualized, very personalized, and when I'm studying all this, there's some really good charts out there that chart, basically feelings and which ones kind of tie together, and from mild to extreme and so on. So feelings is a rather big kettle of fish, which is why I think we should start with thoughts. But eventually, as we learn to master these little sessions that we set aside, these little training sessions that I refer to, we just start off very slow, little doable things. And as we grow this skill, and as this skill becomes more of our natural mindset and natural way of examining things that are going on, we can start to tackle the more difficult things. Behaviors, in my view, are kind of the easiest. We're just more socially trained to be aware of our behaviors. That can be difficult, as you know, when lots of things are going on inside and we're trying so hard to control our behaviors. But when I come back to mindfulness training and little mindfulness approaches to our day-to-day, just the things we have to do, all the little chores and things that we have to do anyway, we can learn to make that a lot easier. Okay, now, so that's a little bit more about thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and what we're looking at for goals with what we're going to do with this new training and skill we're learning. Now, I just want to touch on briefly on core stuff, and this is where, boy, oh boy, you get into core stuff, and this is where the defenses really go up. You get into any kind of discussion online and you touch on these core things, you'll notice, well, people get very defensive. Nonetheless, in these little sessions, these safe little sessions that we set aside for this process we're learning, these are things we have to examine as well. So we have this core. We have beliefs, and we have values. We have our sense of self, who we are, and all this, our ego. And in the presentation, I said, a lot of this work is kind of, accepting there's some uncomfortable truths about ourselves. And if we're really struggling with ourselves in the world and we want to understand why, and I went through this, trust me, even these things would kind of have to examine. And these things can, it's possible they serve us well, but I think if you look at other people, you will see where their beliefs and values and sense of ego are kind of getting in the way, we shall say. And if this is, if this is what's going on in other people, we have to accept this is probably going on in ourselves too. Okay, so what I've learned is so much of this process is things we kind of have to come to terms with ourselves. It's very hard when other people tell us to do these things or question these things, because, like I say, we'll get defensive. But if we create the right kind of space that we're talking about, and getting into this different mental space with the mindfulness and the meditative techniques and things, and in the blog post on mindfulness, meditation, cognitive behavior therapy, I mentioned, that this is all scary. There's no question. Like, big part when we're, having mental health meltdowns, there is a lot of fear going on. It's another inescapable little truth. We can couch all these things in any kind of terms and mental concepts we want, but at the very often at the core, and this is kind of a philosophical observation, but it's also very simple brain biology and brain structure thing. Fear is what's going on. And if you're not full of fear, and I see people whose lives are pretty out of whack. They have no fear. And so everything feels okay. One of the differences between us and those people who don't seem to melt down is we understand the fear involved here. So yes, all this is, all this stuff going on is scary. Examining it within ourselves is scary. But as I said in the blog post, in these little sessions, these little, and it's hard to deal with fear all day. So what we, need to do is in these little sessions, we're going to allow ourselves to be brave and just kind of be able to face whatever's going on. This is really, really important because, one of the shitty truths I found in all my years in the mental health system and psychiatrists and psychologists, and friends trying to help, is it really does come down to you to sort these things out. You can learn tools, you can do all these things, but you're the one who has to use the tools to get yourself out of where you are and where you need to go. Okay, so we learn to, we just one of those things. And boy, when I talk about this core stuff, and this kind of ties into beliefs, a lot of what's going on has to do with confidence. And, when we feel confident, we feel less fearful, don't we? So, one of the things we're kind of working on in these little sessions is building this confidence that can, where we can truthfully, deeply feel, okay, I think I got this. And, you can, confidence is tied in with bravery. If we feel confident, we can feel more brave about handling something. So this is something else we're building here. And I know what it's like to be absolutely scared shitless about life. That's why I ended up in hospitals and stuff. So, this is all stuff I had to work on from the ground up, from absolutely nothing. I had to start with little pebbles and make something a little bigger and then bigger things. So, I understand this. But this is what we have to work on. So we do this in these little sessions to start with. So in these sessions, we give ourselves permission to be brave. And when we feel a little braver, we can tackle things a little easier, a little stronger. And slowly, bit by bit, we feel okay, this went okay. I think, I can do this, and we start to feel a little more confident. We feel a little more confident. We feel a little more brave, and we can start tackling some of these things in ourselves that may or may not be working for us, and these deep inner core things, and then the thoughts and feelings and behaviors we looked at. Okay, so these are all little steps in the process, and building ourselves up to be able to do this. And what you will find when we practice all these little things, we learn the mindfulness a little bit, the meditation techniques a little bit, and we start doing these little kind of training sessions, private training sessions, where we're learning and building these things. More and more, your brain will just start to default to these kind of new thinking skills and processes for dealing with all this stuff. Okay, so now where I am kind of going with everything in the polar bears and getting you in a better place where you can deal with life more is what I'm, and this sounds like some sort of corny kind of, well, it sounds corny, but what we're really learning is power. Everybody wants power. You can't deny it. Even if you don't think you want power, trust me, there's a part of all of us that want more power over things. I know people, they say, I don't want power, and then I watch them in action, and I'm going, you want more power over things. So it's really actually kind of necessary. We all need our personal power. And what that kind of means, what I think of it as, and how I think of it in myself, and what I try to teach, what we really want is more control. Now, as you know, if you've been following, a lot of the biology, the physiological stuff that becomes part of the disease model of what we're going through. And these are actually physiological, biological damage things in our very little brain structures and our bodies, comes from stress. Stress is what is kind of the spark that ignites it all. And when you study stress and what makes us, stressful situations are going to happen. Life is like that. You cannot escape stressful situations. We try to. That's why we end up in these little cages. But life is life. Events are going to happen, and some of them are going to be stressful. A lot of them are going to be stressful. And one of the key components within an individual of whether something is cripplingly stressful or manageable is the sense of control. You can take two people in identical situations, and one has some sort of control, and there's all kinds of really, really interesting experiments about this. The person with control, heart rate is okay, levels of glucocorticoids and all these stress hormones, that's okay. You take another individual identical to situation and take away any element of control, that person, again, all the stress control, stress response stuff is identical throughout most of the animal world. So you can take any kind of critter or human, and put in these situations, and the actual body biology is identical. So you take away the element of control, and this whole cascade of damaging, toxic stress response goes off. So now, this is the topic for another session, but when we are discussing getting our minds and bodies and all these things under control, or reducing the physical, all these symptoms, it boils down to understanding and managing stress. And as I say, one of the key fundamentals to that is the sense and element of control. And one of the shitty truths about life, unless you're, some powerful political person or something, but for all us ordinary people out there, we can't control the world. We can't control anything in the world. We can't control other people around us. You could examine this any which way you want, through any philosophy or neuroscience or cognitive behavior science and all these things. The bare bones truth is the only thing we can control is ourselves. This comes back to being scary, because it is. Because, we feel this loss of control. We feel all this anxiety. It feels, we feel absolutely out of control. And this is a huge part of what creates the cycle of all this mental turmoil, emotional turmoil, behavior turmoil, and stress, is this element of loss of control, not having any control over what's going on around us. So all these things we're learning, the mindfulness, the meditative techniques, and what we're learning in this whole triad of cognitive behavior therapy is building the control within us. Again, all this takes time, but we have to begin with this fundamental understanding. You can't control others around you. You can't. And in truth, nobody can. Even really powerful people. It's just a short-term illusion. They can do some things and appear in control. But ultimately, we, especially us mental health suffering people, and the majority of people, if you look around the world, a lot of people are melting down with stress and anxiety right now, and depression. And a lot of this is this sense of not being able to control what's going on around us. And if we let go of this belief that we, somehow have to control all the stuff going on, and accept the truth that all we can control is ourselves, and we start to build the tools to do that, and create a stronger sense of ourselves. This is where this ego thing is really important, and why I talk a lot about ego defenses and these things. We build this sense of ourselves, and we can control what's going on in our own mind and body, and our reactions and behaviors. This is where the power comes from, to start having better control over your immediate environment. You do that, then you can start exercising more power and things. And I'm not talking strong arm power. I'm just talking the ability to have some sort of input, or help change things around us. It takes power to do that. And that has to come from within us, okay? So control, and another one that gets a lot of people rather uncomfortable responsibility. I always have trouble, and I think I'm still spelling that wrong. It's one of my favorite words to misspell. If it's spelled wrong, you can shoot me or put the right spelling over in the question thing there. But yeah, responsibility, control, very, very related. We kind of want to have sort of responsibility over things going on around us. And we have a lot of trouble with others kind of sort of being responsible for what's going on with us. And when you go back to the little thing here, this is where this others part kind of comes into play. And one of the most powerful things I've learned, I learned this years ago. There's kind of one of these self-help, mental health, mental success gurus from the 90s. Well, he existed before that, but I came across him in the 90s. Stephen Covey, author of the 7 Daily Habits of Successful People, I think it was called. He had some really interesting things, really eye-opening things for me to say about this concept of self-responsibility. And he broke it down. When we are, if we take full responsibility for our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and this comes back to this whole blame thing, and get away from blaming life or others and all this stuff. Doesn't mean we blame ourselves, not at all. It's just we take personal responsibility for everything going on within us. Because again, ultimately, you're the only person who can do that. If you allow others to be responsible for what's going on with you, you lose all of this. And you lose this. And this is where we get into this powerless helplessness. There's this term, learned helplessness, that's a really kind of key element to what's going on with a lot of mental health difficulties. If we allow others to have responsibility over what's going on with us, then we lose these things. And that's where the stress, this is where all the shitty stuff happens. So a lot of what we're learning is just, it's kind of weird because one time we have to sort of interact with the world more. But we have to take full personal responsibility to how we get through life and what's going on with whatever's going on in life. No matter how difficult it is, life is life. Like I say, it is going to be difficulties. And if you allow those outside factors power and control over you, then you're lost, you're hooked, which is why we're here. We learn this. And then we start gaining more of this. This is what helps us control what stress does to us, or what stress even is. And then all the biological symptoms, the physiological symptoms, and this comes back to what we were talking about last week with music therapy and things. We can start allowing those things to heal. Okay, so what Stephen Covey said about responsibility, this whole concept of being completely responsible for ourselves, if we break down the 2 root words of responsible, it means we're response-able. We are better able to respond to life around us when we take full responsibility for ourselves and we start building these things. Okay, so this is a real big part of what this is all about and where I need to get you. It's where I needed to get myself. And you know, all those fundamentals, all these things I talk about, and why I got from being, literally on the brink of death with what bipolar and all the wicked soup of stuff I had going on, and how I'm able to do these shows, everything to do with the polar bears, everything to do with how I'm able to deal with life. Because 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I was I was completely disabled. Wasn't able to think for myself, wasn't able to make any decisions for myself. And, I was a hair's breadth away from taking my life. I can't tell you how many times, because I didn't have these things. So all these things I do, all these things I teach are a daily habit. There are 0 days where I don't work on these things, because I know if I don't work on these things, I'll right back down I go. I can't afford that, and neither can you. Okay, now I didn't leave any time for questions. I talked for 45 minutes. I'm so terrible. I'm sorry, but we really have to learn these things, though. And I'm hoping, because I can anticipate a lot of questions. I was once upon a time, I was a very good teacher, and a good teacher learns to anticipate the questions their students are afraid or too self-conscious to ask. A couple more notes, and then I'm going to tie this off. The last thing I want to kind of introduce about these little mindfulness, meditative CBT sessions, these new daily habits we're going to build, is what I've always thought of them as is, life, we're going through life, there's going to be trouble. There's going to be trouble in our head. There's going to be trouble going on all over the place. And this is life. Like, everybody goes through this. 0 people don't go through this. And, so like the kids say, shit happens. Well, I guess we've said that for a long time, haven't we? So, this is, we can figure this all as some kind of trouble. So what I've come to thought of as these sessions, and what I've kind of built them into, and now they're just sort of a natural way my mind works, is I kind of think of it as troubleshooting. There's some kind of, you take your car, and it's going gonk, 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 and, it could be all kinds of things. You take it into the mechanic, maybe listens and gonk, 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 or whatever's going on. And, he's going to have these little step-by-step troubleshooting things. As you look at a car, like, where the hell is that coming from? It could be all kinds of things. And that's a car. Car is about 1/1,000,000th as complicated as this thing. So, just like any problem, there has to be some kind of troubleshooting process, or else the problem's just going to keep going. It becomes chronic, and everything goes to hell in a handbasket. So we need some sort of troubleshooting process. So I really look at this as a troubleshooting process. So we get into the habit of going through these things. What's going on with my thoughts, my feelings, and again, as I kind of go through future programs on this, we'll learn more about how to do this. But we can, after we get good at this, it'll become faster. It'll become more natural. Any skill, it's going to be slow and difficult to begin with. But as you begin to poke away at it, the brain is ridiculously good at this. You give it a job to do, it'll just, okay, I got this new skill to learn, and it'll just work on it. Next thing you know, it's just happening. So this, we start to do this thing, this kind of a troubleshooting process becomes more natural. Okay, where something's going on, some kind of trouble, where's the root of it, or the cause, or whatever, and what can I do about it? And I'm going to use that note to kind of tie off where all this goes to. If we make a little flow chart here, we have trouble. That's a bit of a euphemism. I know trouble could be some pretty wacky stuff, I know. So we have some sort of trouble. So we have to whatever, identify, what's going on, where's the root of the trouble, what's going on. We need some sort of solution, and something we actually do, in action. And that people is where the behavior part comes in. Every day we wake up, we have to do stuff. Kind of inescapable. I know we do sometimes, we all do, this whole mental health, all this stuff going on. Sometimes there's no choice. We just kind of have to escape it for a while, but that doesn't work for very long, does it? So, every day we're kind of required to do something. All my positive difference fundamentals, every one of them are better things to do when we're in those shitty places. Like I've said, if you crippled with fatigue and all the things going on and you can't do anything else, listen to freaking music. Okay? Every day we need some kind of thing to do. So a lot of this is, if we can make it really simple, we have some sort of trouble. What the hell is the trouble? What the hell is the solution? What the hell do I do? Okay, and always this, and then, speaking of the stress response system, everything about the stress response system is do something. It's the naggiest person in the world. Do something. If you don't give it something to do, the freaking thing won't shut off, I guarantee you. But we have to kind of do the right thing. Otherwise, we're running around wasting time and effort and all that stuff. So all this kind of boils down to troubleshooting. What the hell's the trouble? Here's the trouble. Identify, something, what's going on. You're not going to be perfect at this. This is a process you learn in time and with experience. Even your mechanic took a while to get there. Some kind of solution, some kind of action, do something. And I am going to keep saying this, but something really important is one day at a time. I'm saying over and over and over and over and over again, you're not going to sort everything in your life out today. It's not going to happen. God Almighty, I wish it could happen. I wish there was some magic wand. Click your heels together 3 times and go back to Kansas. Not going to happen. It's why we melt down. We want this whole freaking mess to go away right away. That doesn't happen. We melt down some more, and it's just this wicked cycle. So, all this is going to be one day, one people, a day at a time. So, every day, and this is kind of why I like to start my day with these mindfulness sessions, make that a habit. And we can lay out what are we going to do on this day. And it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to solve everything, but it's going to chip away at it. And it's it's not so much, in the beginning, this is a slow process. So, one of our habits we got to break is the expectations of instant results. This is where 99.9% of people get all screwed up, is expectations are way out of whack. So it's just a skill building. We just get into the habit. One day, what are we going to do on that day and make those things we do work better for our core value? And we do these things, people, the future will just work itself out somehow better. You can't solve the future today. Nobody can. You can plan for it, plan little steps, but those happen day by day. Okay, I'm looking for questions. I don't see any questions. One of these days. Okay, so there you are, bravely following along. Another long polar bear session. They're on film, as it were. You can go to YouTube and watch them any way you want, 10 minutes at a time or whatever. Some of it's visual, but you can kind of think of them as a little podcast and just listen to them. Now, the one question I had, I'll address that quickly, and then our time is up, about mindfulness. Now, one of the misconceptions is you have to go around being mindful all day. And it's true, some people do that, monks and stuff, but monks don't have a whole lot to do. In a monastery, that's not life. And, so it's one thing, to be in some little isolated thing and be mindful all day and do all this monk stuff. But that's not us in the real world. So people point this out. This is really unrealistic to be mindful all the time, and it absolutely is. And we actually don't, as much as, mindfulness is important to get tasks done and get a lot of this chaos under control, the truth is we need mind wandering. And it's also, mindfulness in the beginning, at least, is quite energy depleting, I will say. It's tiring, absolutely. It gets not tiring. It removes tiring stuff when we learn to do it a little bit and become better at it. But in the beginning, for sure, it's quite tiring. And no matter how good we're at it, how good we are at it, it kind of, especially if we're creative people or for any kind of people, really, we need the mind watering. We just kind of need to let it go. This is hard for some of us because when we let it go, shit happens in our head. But you'll find this. You need to just let your mind wander. It's in cognitive neuroscience and cognitive psychology people, they understand this. That mind wandering is really important. So mind wandering is kind of the opposite of mindfulness, but when we learn all these tools and we start getting things under control, this mind wandering isn't the chaos that it has been in the past. So mind wandering might be more useful when we need solutions and the solution's not in front of us, it's not presenting itself. We need to be creative or something. This is where mind wandering, where we just kind of let things kind of go. And when we're learning all our habits, our new music therapy stuff, we're going to learn about data input next week. All kinds of good things can happen. Okay, so So yeah, mindfulness doesn't mean like you're going into this, you're this locked-in zombie all day. This is one of the big misconceptions, and why a lot of people kind of question the whole mindfulness movement. They don't understand it's not a movement; it's just a 2,500-year-old practice. But anyway, so it has to be this balance between mindfulness and mind wandering. And, so part of our goal is to get these in better balance, in better harmony, okay? That's what life is all about, people, balancing different things. We're not going to have it all this way or that way. It's balancing these different things, skills, stuff we're learning, stuff we're supposed to do, not do, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we are, an hour is up. Thank you for joining me. Oh my goodness, here we go. So, once again, if you're coming across this broadcast out of the blue, here's Mrs. Bean. This is Mrs. Bean. Mrs. Bean does all this stuff. I do all this stuff. Mrs. Bean had a lot of problems when I got her and still does sometimes. So I do all this with Mrs. Bean. She's my #1 student. But anyways, if you're coming across all this, hi, you're wondering who the hell I am and why I'm telling you all this stuff. I am taming the polar bears at blogspot.ca. You can kind of learn a little bit about what my story is and all this taming the polar bears stuff. Questions, I work privately with people. If you're interested in anything like that, you just write to tamingthepolarbears@gmail.com. Have a good Sunday. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.